Jasmine Gun interrupted him. You're wrong, it's not 200,000. Li Gang asked in surprise, then how much? 2 billion. Li Gang's expression was wooden, and River chuckled, saying, Where do you think you are? 2 billion, heh, might as well give the whole Jinxian to your family, right? Sure, that would be most welcome, Jasmine Gun laughed disdainfully. Li Gang frowned slightly and said, If you talk like this, we can't continue our discussion today. Jasmine Gun sneered softly, Yes, we can't continue, and there's no need to. She suddenly burst into loud laughter, laughing so hard that the three people opposite her were at a loss, and even felt a bit creeped out. If that person saw Jasmine Gun at this moment, he would definitely tell her, You are always so beautiful. Dusk, the peak of rush hour. The place was crowded, and nearly half the street was cordoned off. Xander Su stood by the roadside. He didn't need to deliberately inquire, as countless onlookers around him described the morning scene over and over again. At that time, there was a huge bang, as if a corner of the earth had collapsed. Living so long, he had never heard such a loud noise. The ground even shook. All the pedestrians and vehicles on the road stopped in that instant. The entire street was silent for 5 or 6 seconds, then everyone started shouting and ran towards the street office. The west corner of the street office building had collapsed, with black smoke billowing, and the people inside ran out as if their lives depended on it. Someone asked, How many died? I heard that 4 or 5 died on the spot, blown to pieces, bodies all in bits and pieces. Plus, more than a dozen people were seriously injured and are still being resuscitated in the hospital. What caused the explosion? Don't know, maybe a gas cylinder. Another person denied, Impossible, a gas cylinder couldn't bring down a building. I've been to their office, there's no kitchen, where would the gas cylinder come from? Then it's unclear, maybe something like pipelines. No, I heard it was an explosive package. Wow, how could there be an explosive package? By the way, who died? I heard from someone who escaped that the explosion happened in a Western office where a few people from the town were signing a compensation agreement with a family. Oh, the Yi family. Did all those people die? Definitely. Xander Su's heart trembled violently. Hearing the discussions around him, he had a clear understanding of the incident. If it really was explosives, it must be the work of Jasmine Gun, the former chemical queen. She actually went all out against them. Old friend, I can't stop you this time. You're definitely coming back to the country. Xander Su pressed his temples, his trembling hands took out his phone, and dialed a police friend's number to inquire if one of the deceased was named Jasmine Gun. Indeed, it was. He hung up the phone, struggled fiercely in his mind, and still took out his phone, dialed a number. Hello? What's wrong? Xander Su hesitated. There's something, sooner or later you should know. The other party took a deep breath and said indifferently, Did something happen to Jasmine Gun? Xander Su steeled his heart and said, Yes. What happened to her? The other party didn't seem very anxious. Xander Su was silent for a long time, finally saying, She's dead. There was silence on the other end of the phone for a long time, then, surprisingly, a light laugh. Well then, I know. We'll see each other in a few days. You're coming back to the country early? Yes. Xander Su sighed. All right, I knew you would definitely come back to see her one last time, but you might not be able to see her face. You mentioned a few months ago that you've been feeling unwell. Don't get too excited, keep a calm mindset, okay, we'll talk when we meet. Deputy Director Greg Wang of the County Public Security Bureau, in charge of criminal investigation, walked over with a gloomy face and waved to the forensic team leader, Olchin. Boss, you're here. How many died? Greg Wang frowned. Looks like 4 died, because the scene was blown to pieces, the bodies can't be completely assembled. It said that there were 4 people at the explosion point. Plus, 16 people were injured to varying degrees, with 5 seriously injured, still being resuscitated. Can they be saved? I asked the doctors, probably not going to die. Greg Wang pressed his temples and exhaled. Who did this? Don't know, the criminal investigation team is still investigating. I only know it was an explosive explosion. What kind of explosive? Can't fully determine yet, need to continue analyzing the reaction products before and after the explosion. The analysis is halfway done, it should be trinitrotoluene. Trinitrotoluene? What's that? TNT. Greg Wang's eyes lit up. He had forgotten that the full name of TNT was trinitrotoluene. When he heard the word TNT, it was like a bucket of cold water poured over him, and he asked in a deep voice, military explosive? Military uses it more, but many civilian blasting projects also use it. Greg Wang handed Oldchin a cigarette, lit one himself, thought for a moment, and asked, was the perpetrator killed in the explosion, or did they escape? Don't know, heard the criminal investigation team is still taking statements from the injured at the street office, not very clear about what happened this morning. Greg Wang pondered for a moment, then asked, can trinitrotoluene be bought on the market? Oldchin said, this stuff is regulated stricter than guns. How much construction units buy and use is strictly monitored. In our province, past cases like this used homemade gunpowder, which has limited power and poor stability, often only killing the perpetrator. I've never seen anyone play with their life using TNT. Greg Wang pinched the cigarette butt. Homemade gunpowder is generally self-made, right? Yeah, it's simple, just buy some materials, or get them from fireworks. Greg Wang said, what about TNT, can it be made by oneself? Oldchin shook his head, it's very difficult, requires fuming nitric acid and concentrated sulfuric acid, needs industrial equipment, probably can't be made by oneself. Greg Wang nodded, all right, you go back to work, I'll go understand the situation with others. He had made up his mind. This case had a huge impact. The county had already mobilized all relevant departments to block the news, but obviously, such a thing couldn't be suppressed. They needed to solve the case quickly and clarify the facts. Currently, the tasks were, first, to wait for Oldchin to finally completely determine the components of the explosive. If it really was TNT, they needed to thoroughly investigate the surrounding counties and cities. Another task was to ask the criminal investigation team about the latest investigation progress. He walked towards the criminal investigation team's offices, and before he got there, Captain Lin ran up to him, urgently saying, "Boss, we should have identified the perpetrator." Oh, so fast? Greg Wang was somewhat pleasantly surprised, not expecting to know the perpetrator in just half a day. Captain Lin said, this morning, the town was signing an agreement with the He family, the one that River messed with. It was the homeowner's daughter-in-law who went to sign. There were 4 people in the office at the time, besides Jasmine Gan. There were Deputy Town Mayor Li Gang, River, and the street director. All 4 died on the spot. Of course, the bodies were completely blown to pieces and charred, not a single intact finger could be found, but it was impossible to escape from that room. We also asked other people, confirming that there were only those 4 in the room at the time. The explosion came from that office. We checked the surveillance. At that time Jasmine Gunn was carrying a shoulder bag. What was inside the shoulder bag couldn't be seen. I guess it was the explosives. After that, we checked Jasmine Gunn's resume. She was a student in the chemistry department of Zhejiang University more than 10 years ago. I also flipped through her documents at school and found that several of her papers discussed explosive processes. She was very proficient in the work of making explosives. Greg Wang clearly didn't expect a woman to play with their lives using explosives, then sneered, River is such a fool, he deserved to die. If it weren't for someone protecting him, I would have gotten rid of him long ago. Li Gang is no good either. But I've heard that Lu Weigua has a good reputation among the common people. This matter really didn't concern him, sigh. He thought for a moment and continued, now that the case is basically clear, you guys take the search warrant and search Jasmine Gaughan's house. Later, sort out the criminal motive, the process, and the surveillance footage, and then we can close the case. In a few days, after communicating with the higher-ups, we'll decide when and how to announce it to the public. Jacqueline said, "Okay, I'll get on it right away." Afterward, Jacqueline and his team searched Jasmine Gaughan's house, finding various chemical equipment and leftover materials, as well as TNT particles left in the house. The County Bureau then sent people to visit the related material sales points. Jasmine Gaughan had bought most of her materials from the agricultural market and the high school chemical sales point, and the shopkeepers confirmed that this woman had bought things a few days ago. Jasmine Gaughan refined various fertilizers, nitric acid, sulfuric acid, and pesticides through repeated purification and chemical reactions, eventually making TNT explosives. The entire case structure is clear, the criminal motive is explicit, and the evidence is conclusive. The perpetrator and the victim perished together, and the perpetrator's family was unaware of this, so there was no further need to consider how to sentence or compensate. When the county announced it to the public, they encountered some trouble. They couldn't say that a man from the Gaughan family was caught and sent to the police station, only to have his ashes returned, which enraged the female protagonist to the point of detonation. After unifying the narrative, they announced that Jasmine Gaughan was eccentric, didn't talk much to others, had severe mental illness, and faced significant obstacles in her life and marriage, leading her to resent society. Evidence included her comments on the internet a few years ago, criticizing the government and joking about her married life. The county also increased manpower and stability measures, controlling media opinion, especially preventing foreign media from having the opportunity to interview Jasmine Gaughan's family. In short, the case was concluded like this. They thought it was all over and that calm would soon return. But what they didn't know was, he had returned. In his eyes, what Jasmine Gaughan did was child's play. Xander Sue said that man had an IQ of 160, although he had never tested his IQ, it shouldn't be too low. During their student days, chemistry students jokingly called Jasmine Gaughan the chemical queen. If there really was a chemical queen, then he must be the true chemical pope, except he didn't like the tragic method of explosives. If you're going to do it high-end. At dusk, outside the Gaughan family's yard, a man lifted a basin full of feces and poured it over the head of He Jianxing's mother. She remained silent, smoothed her hair, wiped the feces off her face, and stood alone at the door. Inside the yard, a child sat on the ground crying. He was Jasmine Gaughan's young son. More than 10 people stood outside the door, continuously cursing inwardly, some picking up wooden boards to hit, spitting saliva. These people were relatives of the deputy town mayor Li Gang and the deputy police chief River. A woman furiously pushed her mother-in-law to the ground, led people in, and grabbed the young child out. The child was so frightened that he couldn't even cry. The grandmother kneeled on the ground, tugging at their trousers, pleading, "Don't hurt the child, hit me instead if you want." Adults hitting a child, after all, wasn't right. If they went too far, it could lead to serious trouble. Although the woman was full of rage, she knew the limits. She threw the child to the ground and incited her own son, about 10 years old, hit him, "It's this little beast's mother who caused your father's death." Under the support of his mother and relatives, the little brat immediately rushed up, kicking the 4-year-old child without restraint. The grandmother hurriedly crawled over, shielding her grandson with her back, letting them kick and hit. Far away, many people gathered, but no one dared to step forward to help. Among them were relatives of the Gaughan family, but they only said some irrelevant words, "Let it go, the person is already dead, these two are pitiful enough, don't do this." On the other side, a 110 police car was parked, a few policemen were smoking outside, not stepping in to stop. After they arrived at the scene and saw it was the victim's family retaliating against the Gaughan family, since they all knew each other, and the victim's family were people from their circle, and the Gaughan family had no background or connections, the police didn't intervene, just watching how things unfolded. If it got too out of hand, they would step in to persuade later. At the other end of the street, Xander Su and a chubby middle-aged man wearing a hat stood in an inconspicuous corner. The man clenched his fists tightly, fire blazing in his eyes, gritting his teeth, unable to hold back from stepping forward. Xander Su stopped him with a hand. "I'll go." Xander Su immediately went to the police car, greeted them, shared cigarettes, exchanged a few pleasantries, then mentioned that this might not look good. If it spread, the higher-ups wouldn't be pleased. The policeman thought it made sense and went to persuade those people away. Afterward, Xander Su pursed his lips, glanced at his old friend beside him, patted his shoulder, without saying anything. In a high-end restaurant club, Xander Su tapped his fingers lightly on the table, looking at the table full of good dishes. He occasionally drank some wine, smoked a few cigarettes, frowning at the man wearing a hat sitting opposite him. The man was actually the same age as Xander Su, also 35, but he had a round chubby face, some hair loss, and his figure had clearly gone out of shape. With a protruding belly, his abs turned into a single mass, looking at least a decade older than the handsome Xander Su. All night, the man didn't touch a single dish, only ordering a bowl of noodles. At the moment, he was focused on eating his noodles, very slowly, bite by bite. With his chubby cheeks, he looked like a pig, and moreover, a pig in its twilight years. Finally, when he finished eating, Xander Su glanced at him with disgust. "Want some wine?" The man finally looked up, smiled, and slowly shook his head. "You know, I don't drink." Xander Su said, "I know you don't drink, but at this time, I think you might want to have some. Come on, don't be shy." "All right, then I'll have some." His attitude seemed compliant, indifferent to everything. Xander Su poured him a small cup of white wine. He drank it in one gulp, then immediately frowned, opening his mouth and gasping, "I really can't handle white wine, it's so spicy." Watching his reaction, Xander Su burst into laughter, eventually laughing so hard that tears came out. Seeing Xander Su's laughter, the man also started laughing, and it took a long time before they stopped. "It's been a long time since we sat down to eat together like this." "Yeah, after you went to America, you stayed for 10 years. I heard your parents also moved to Australia to live with your brother. I thought I'd never see you again in this lifetime. We see each other so rarely, yet we don't feel like strangers. That's rare. Who made us childhood friends who grew up together?" The man smiled. "Remember middle school? That was the peak of our rebellious phase. The school was full of delinquent students, always collecting protection money, fighting and brawling, and we too, focused only on studying, always got bullied.